Hi, I'm Megan from Elements of DIY and welcome to my acrylic pour channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do what is called a dirty pour technique, which is actually one of the easiest techniques to get started for a beginner. So I'll do a very basic pour and then I'll work my way up to a little bit more advanced pour using a blowtorch. Alright, so let's get started. So first I have a rectangular canvas here. I have all of my paints mixed. Okay, so the idea behind a dirty cup pour, essentially what it is actually just layering a bunch of paint inside of a cup. And there's a few different ways that you can do this, but essentially all you have to do is layer all of the paint in the cup, and then you can either continue to pour it on the canvas like this, or you can actually do what's called a flip cup technique, and you flip the paint over on top of the canvas and then lift it up from there and it will disperse the paint. And I'll show you a few different tricks with that to make it a little bit easier. I will use a clear cup to get started so you can see the paint being layered in this first one. And we're gonna do just a really basic pour first. I'm actually not even gonna use a base color behind it. There'll actually just be enough paint in the cup that will cover the entire canvas. Today I'm also using a pre-mixed white. I typically don't use the pre-mixed paint, but I figured since this is a very, very beginner, it's very easy to get the pre-mixed paints from the store. So that's what the white is. And then also the blue one is a pre-mixed store-made paint. So what I'm gonna do first is line up my colors. So I'm definitely gonna include white, I think gold, and then we'll do teal and gray. So I'm just going to do those four colors for this first pour. It doesn't matter the order that you put the colors in the cup, but what I have found is if you break up colors with a metallic or a white, it usually creates a very beautiful contrast to the paint. So I'm just going to get started. I'll show you. And then I'm going to repeat that same color process one more time. So I have all of my paint loaded in this cup. Now you may be thinking, how do you know how much paint to use on the size of the canvas? And so that's just going to come with time of trying to figure that out. This one specifically, this is actually a pretty good amount for, this is a 12 by 12 canvas here. Worst case scenario, you could always just create another cup of the same thing and do a second time to finish a little bit of the edges if you don't have it. You can always add some of a base color around the outside. So if all of the paint just sits right here and I can't get it to go over the sides, I can always add white around the edges to take the color through it. Okay, so the other thing is sometimes it actually works better if you do let the paint sit for a little bit in the cup. It will continue to stay separated as you can see it here, but it starts to kind of like work together and some of the chemical properties start to effervesce in there, as you can kind of see from the zoom in here. You can start to see that the teal and the white are starting to mix a little bit. And I'm actually just gonna stick a stir stick in here and stir it once. That's just gonna create a little bit of a deeper swirl in the paint, but I don't recommend stirring it too terribly much. So just about that much. Okay, and then as far as applying it to the canvas, you obviously could just dump all the paint in the center. I'm actually gonna do kind of like a swirl motion all the way around the outside, pouring pretty slowly. You could do like a circular motion all the way around the canvas here. You could do it in a square. You could do lines across the canvas this way. Or you could just randomly, you know, just kind of make like a snake design in the center. There's a lot of different ways that you can apply the paint to the canvas, and each one is going to change how it looks. But just to keep this super simple, again, I just stirred that once, and I'm just going to do it in a circular motion in the center of the cup. You could technically reuse this cup. That's actually what I used to think it meant to be a dirty cup pour. You easily could use this again to pour a bunch of paint in it, but just because I'm going to be changing colors, I'm actually not going to do that. So this is just garbage, and all the paint is on the canvas. So now I'm just going to start tilting and moving it around. Now I'm trying to get to the point that it is coming off the canvas on all sides. And to be completely honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of this pre-mixed white that I just used. I think that and the teal actually mixed together a little bit more than I wanted it to. And thank God they are not too close to each other on the color wheel. Otherwise, of course, they would have created that mud color. I'm just gonna carry it over all the edges here. And then this one, you could absolutely call it done from here. I think once it dries, it will really start to show some of those cells and create a little bit more character in here. As you can see, some of them are starting to surface. I'm actually going to take a blowtorch to this right now to help reduce some of those air bubbles. So as you can see, it's helping some of those bubbles surface. Takes a little bit more interest to the painting. All right, so we'll check back to see how it looks once it's dry. I'm going to move this off. All right, now I'm going to do a different technique. Same thing where the paint is layered in the cup, but this time I'm actually going to have the cup and flip it onto the canvas. Because I'm going to be using a smaller cup of paint, I will be adding some white to the edges here, just so I can make sure the paint covers the entire canvas. So I'm actually going to pick the canvas up and set the cup on top like that so it creates a tight seal, and then hold the cup and flip it over. And then I am going to leave the cup sitting there for a moment while I add the white to the edges. Just going to give it a minute to start kind of moving itself around the canvas here. Obviously, this is not a perfect square, so it's going to need to go a little bit more to the edges here that are wider. And I will say, since you have so many colors in such close proximity with the cup here, I have noticed that the composition will turn out a little bit better if you move the paint slower than you normally do in your pours. So just even tilting it, I don't tilt super fast in any direction, and it creates a little bit better composition with the cells. Make sure the paint is covering all the edges. There is a lot of paint right here, so this is gonna on its own kind of move over. So I'm just gonna start it a little bit there and then let gravity do its thing while it's drying. Okay, but you can see this one, again, I'm not using any cell medium or silicone, but you can see that when you're pouring a little bit slowly, it actually creates some really cool patterns in here and cells. This almost looks like a geode, and when it dries especially, the black is going to continue to separate from the other colors, and you can see that there's some really pretty cells in here. So this one, again, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm not even going to torch it. I'm just going to let these, no, I will torch it. Any chance I can get to play with the blowtorch, I am there. So one of the reasons to use the blowtorch is it helps the bubbles, it helps get the bubbles out of the paint. So it helps them surface now versus naturally later. So you can control kind of the layers that they happen in. A lot of people end up using heat guns, or there's like a kitchen version of this that you can use. This, I do stuff in the garage with it often, so I like kind of the beefier one, but you definitely do not need a blowtorch that big. And I'll actually link a couple other ones that I think are really great ones in the description below. All right, so I'm gonna move. Okay, so this last one, I'm gonna go ahead and use the rest of the paint that I have. So I still have some gray, gold, teal, and black. And what I'm actually gonna do is prepare 2 mini dirty cups. And I'm gonna have a little bit of fun with the composition on this one. So they will have the same colors layered in the same order, but I'm gonna pour them across the canvas in 2 different places and then add some negative white space around it. So let's see how this turns out. When you're adding the paint to the cup, right now I'm just currently putting the paint directly in the center of the cup. You could also tilt the cup, and maybe I'll do that for the rest of them, and pour the paint in sideways so it goes in slightly different layers. In that cup, so I'm just gonna start with the gray in this one. Another thing you could do is I could do the same technique with the where you flip the cup over on the canvas. You could do that with 2 or 3 or 4 smaller ones as well, and I think that would create a really cool composition. But for this one, I do want to actually pour it. All right, and then adding. So I'm going to try to concentrate the colors here. So I'm going to put some negative white space in the center. I think it might help some of the cells surface a little bit on this because the black is really heavy. If you're interested in how I made this spinner, I'll link the video below about how I set up the spinner because that was my last video that I did last week. And then one other thing I want to show you quickly. So I know a lot of people do pours from gallons of paint. This is one of the greatest little inventions. It's actually lip that goes on the edge of the paint. It's only a couple dollars. I'll link it for you below. You can get it off of Amazon. But do you see how the paint can doesn't have any drips on the outside? And then you just snap this on and off, and it's really easy to use, and then it's really easy to clean too because you can just peel the paint off when it's dry. Let's give this a tiny little spin. Yes, that helped a little bit with those cells there. So from here, I'm going to leave it. I think it's going to dry really well. I think a lot of this stuff is going to surface once it starts to dry. I'm not going to take the blowtorch to this one. I will see how it does on its own, and everything so far is surfacing really well. Thank you again so much for joining me today. Again, I'm Megan from Elements of DIY on Instagram. I'll go ahead and link everything below for you in the descriptions. And please, I love when you guys leave comments. So go ahead and leave some comments below. If you like this video, if there's other content that you want to see, leave a comment there and I promise to respond back.